Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. The EU is adapting to a new security situation, not just on its own continent, but also in the Middle East. Hopes of a more peaceful Syria after the ouster of Bashar al-Assad have so far been dashed, with sectarian massacres happening on the Syrian coast earlier in March, killings that have triggered an exodus of thousands of people across the border into Lebanon. Lebanon itself remains extremely fragile economically and socially. And the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza is clearly far from over, despite a ceasefire that was announced in January. The EU is working with the United Nations to address the challenges of humanitarian aid and reconstruction in this volatile region. And my guest today has a lot of first-hand experience of that. Jorge Moreira da Silva is the Executive Director of UNOPS, the United Nations agency dedicated to implementing humanitarian and development projects. He's a former member of the European Parliament, a former senior official at the OECD in Paris, and a former Minister of Environment and Energy in the Portuguese government, and he joins me from Brussels. Welcome to the program, Mr. Moreira da Silva. So at the latest EU Council, member states voiced their deep alarm at the dramatic military escalation in the Middle East, and of course the Israeli airstrikes in Gaza is very much in people's minds. What is your response to what's happening in Gaza at the moment?
Well, thank you for having me. And what is happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable. It's very unfortunate that we return to the escalation of the conflict. I still hope that we can go back soon to the ceasefire and to a political and diplomatic negotiation. It's key to ensure that we bring peace to the Middle East, that we bring peace to Gaza, that we bring all humanitarian aid that is needed to the immense human suffering in Gaza. But as it has been clear from the last more than a year and a half, there was never an issue related with the logistics. There was always a problem related with the political will and with the security conditions. During the ceasefire in the last few weeks, we could provide support to the people, and now with the strikes, with the conflict again, all aid has been stopped, and we are seeing direct impact on civilians, but also in the UN. I've been informed that the UNOPS compound has been hit, and we are obviously following very carefully this week what is happening. I really hope that we can go back to where we were with a ceasefire and restart the political discussions. It's the key moment to bring peace to Gaza and to the Middle East. I visited Gaza, as you know, recently, 3 weeks ago. I saw a devastation across the strip. I saw, obviously, the immense suffering from the people. I saw Gaza flooded by rubble and debris and everything down. More than 70% of all infrastructure has been destroyed. So we need to stop the war, provide all humanitarian aid, and start the conversations to prepare peace process, early recovery and reconstruction.
Let's talk a bit about Syria, because, of course, you've been talking about this issue with members of the European Parliament. You were also, I believe, at the Donors Conference, which has pledged nearly 6 billion euros in aid to Syria. But at the same time, as I said, we have these horrendous massacres and extrajudicial killings that happened on the Syrian coast. You, as well as the EU, have asked for accountability. You say you want an inclusive democratic transition. But when you see that that's not happening, what's the next step then? How do you ensure accountability for such crimes against civilians?
Well, this was a key element for this week's discussion at the International Conference on Syria. And I want to signal the progress that we achieved. In one hand, there was a clear call for accountability by all protagonists in the conference vis-à-vis the caretaking the government in Syria, asking the government to ensure that no violence is allowed, ensuring that no impunity is allowed and all accountability is provided. There was a clear call from the international community, a clear call from representatives of countries, and a clear response from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Syria, committing precisely to ensure that there is a thorough investigation on what happened and that those that perpetrated those crimes will be held to account. But in parallel, nobody found on the violence as a pretext to delay action. And that's why I think that there was a breakthrough progress when donors stepped in, providing, as you mentioned, $6 billion to the people in Syria. I visited Damascus a few weeks ago, and it's important, even if people may think that the Syrian crisis was in 2015 or 2017. No, today, Syria is still at the brink. It's in the middle of immense humanitarian crisis with almost 90% of the population in need, living in extreme poverty conditions, 7 million forced displaced, 6 million refugees. So I think it was important that the international community, in one hand, asked for accountability, but on the other hand, provided a response supporting the Syrians in this current context. So I think it's really important to signal the progress, and now it's the moment where we need to quickly provide support to the Syrians on infrastructure, on early recovery, on reconstruction. This is the key moment.
Yeah, you mentioned refugees. I was going to come to that because at a recent Home Affairs Council, some EU member states suggested that Syrian refugees who fled to Europe during these 14 years of war, that they should return to what these member states now see as a safe country. Are they right or wrong? Is it safe? Where do you stand on that question? Should they go back or not now?
This is a really important question, which is nobody will return home. Nobody left home because they wanted to do so. People were forced, that's why we call it forced displacement. They were forced to flee, to abandon their homes, their places, to escape from war. So nobody will return if there is no security conditions, and nobody will return if there is no social and economic development. That's why for ethical and moral reasons, from a sense of responsibility point of view, it's important that the donor community provides all the support that is needed in Syria, and that will be a way also to get Syrians coming back, not because we want them to come back, to go, but because it's important to them to go back to their places, to the places where they were happy, the places where they have their families. But that's why it's important to create the conditions. The conditions are so relevant that there are tangible elements on this. Let me share with you some information that I got during my visit to Syria when I met the Minister of Education, for instance. I asked him, Minister, what do you need from the international community? And he said, we need access to education. And today, there is almost 9,000 schools that must be built or rehabilitated, and without that, the kids cannot go back to school. So this is a practical element. The same on water, sanitation, energy, roads, transportation. So it's life-saving. So infrastructure is not concrete, is not bricks. It's a key element to untap inequalities, to foster sustainable development. So I really hope that we do not procrastinate on our commitment to provide support to the Syrians. This is the moment.
Okay.
And I really hope that the conference has built the momentum for that.
You're obviously very involved in Ukraine as well, which is a big focus for the European Union at the moment and for the UN. Just outline for us briefly how you're addressing the short-term and longer-term needs in Ukraine.
We address it from a nexus point of view. The nexus is a jargon from those that work on development and humanitarian. What does it mean, the nexus? It means that prevention always. So there is nothing more important to development than peace. So prevention always. Humanitarian as needed, and development wherever possible. What does it mean in practical terms in Ukraine? It means that even during war times, you need to bring all humanitarian need to the people facing immense suffering. But you also need to prepare the reconstruction through early recovery. So you cannot go immediately to reconstruction. You need to do early recovery, repairing infrastructure, rehabilitating entire neighborhoods, rehabilitating energy, water networks. And this is what UNOPS is doing. We are supporting the Ukrainians building schools. We are building schools where we are doing mine action, which is removing unexploded ordnance. The country is flooded by mines, so it's important to remove unexploded ordnance, but also rehabilitating entire neighborhoods for instance, in Mykolaiv. So this is the practical solutions important to bring on the early recovery. But then when peace comes, and we all hope that it will come soon, we can go to the reconstruction. The needs are immense, as we know, and it's important that the international community remains committed, but that we don't deal with this in a zero-sum game, shifting resources from Africa to Ukraine. That's not the point. So we need to support Ukraine, we need to support Africa, we need to support fragile states in a context where 25% of the world, and you were mentioning that at the beginning of our conversation, 25% of the world lives under conflict. So it's important that we address this context when we also face climate change. So that's why I'm very worried, as you imagine, with the cuts on ODA. I'm very worried with the cuts on solidarity globally. It's the moment where we need to raise the bar. We need more solidarity. We need to invest more on the support to people in need. That's not the moment to cut. It's the moment to bring more. And this is in everyone's interest. Yeah. We live in an interdependent world. The more we invest on development, the less we'll need to invest on the emergencies and on forced displacement and in humanitarian crisis.
I think you've explained that jargon of nexus very well for the general public there. Jorge Moreira da Silva, thank you so much for being my guest on Talking Europe. And that's all for this particular episode. Do stay with us here on France 24.